Hello and welcome to our Strategic Compass program. Today, joined by Larry Johnson, former CIA intelligence analyst. Thank you, Larry, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored by the invitation.
Well, the honor is ours. And let's get going immediately because what we are going to be talking about is quite topical. In this sense, we are going to be talking about Israeli attack. I'd like to start with the Israeli attack on Qatar, an American ally, and by implication, an Israeli ally too. And then I would like to also come over to the Israeli bullish behavior across the Middle East.
Sure.
And then we can turn over to the Israeli influence over the U.S. decision-making, including your latest op-ed on the Charlie Kirk's assassination and all the bizarre scenarios that surround it.
Yes.
Let's have your take on the Israeli attack on Qatar and the Israeli behavior in the region lately.
Well, it wasn't just an Israeli attack. It was also an attack by the United States. Mm-hmm. There is absolutely no way that Israel could have carried out this strike in Qatar, in Doha, to be precise, without the knowledge, cooperation, and assistance of the United States. The claims out of Donald Trump's White House that they just learned about it at the last moment, they tried to warn Doha, that's just a flagrant lie. Because of what is at Al Udeid Air Force Base, the Combined Air Operations Center, CAOC, in military jargon, they call it the CAOC. The CAOC contains representatives of a number of countries, both from Europe and I believe some as well from West Asia, and they monitor all air traffic in the area. I mean, in Turkey, in Syria, in Lebanon, Israel, Jordan, Iraq, Iran, all of the Gulf states. Absolutely no way that they would have been uninformed about this. Plus, they have a significant air defense capabilities there. None of that was activated. So this was done with a full cooperation. I would go as far to even suggest that the United States collaborated with Israel in saying, okay, we'll get the Hamas officials to a particular location at a particular time on a particular day, and when they're there, then you can kill them. This was done in the case of Sheikh Hasan Nasrallah. I believe it was done with Soleimani, the Iranian general. And actually we saw a similar thing with respect to the attack on Iran that took place on June 13th. So this was a deliberate act of murder, attempted murder. My understanding is, and what I've heard is that the Turkish intelligence services actually became aware of this plot and alerted the Hamas delegation to that, which is why they were not where they were supposed to be when Israel hoped to kill them. The cover story that Hamas said is that they left their phones to go pray. But, I had speculated from the outset that it sure sounded to me like they had gotten a heads up that this was going to happen and were so went to someplace secure. So whether it was Turkey, Iran, Russia, or China that alerted them, or all four, what we have to recognize is that Israel is a lawless country. They're out of control. And unfortunately, too many of the Arab and Muslim nations in the area continue to enable Israel's behavior.
Well, now, few questions. One is, what would be the ultimate aim to kill the leaders who have very little influence over the military squadrons, operating in Gaza? And all those, political leaders are all around. And I was speaking to a political analyst in Qatar I think it was just last night, and he said, this is a place, the area is well known to everybody. It's called the Hamas district, if you like. It is like all the Hamas people are there. So why would they do this?
I'm sure they sold it to Donald Trump as we get them, we kill them, that will leave open, will make Hamas more amenable to agreeing to the ceasefire terms that Israel wants. So, they're, again, Israel, this is, they've operated by this myth for more than 60 years that they can kill their way to peace. And they can't. It's been proven over and over. They keep killing people, thinking that the killing is going to bring peace, and instead it just brings more war and more suffering.
Well, what about the Arab reaction? I mean, the Arab reaction confirms your analysis. So the Egyptian basically has proposed to set up a NATO-type Arab alliance to contain and restrain Israel one way or the other.
Well, the Arab Islamic Summit, nice words. Where's the action? They haven't done anything. The only country that's actually taking any action against Israel are the Houthis in Yemen, and even Turkey. Turkey is the biggest enabler of this genocide, in my view, of any country in the world right now, because you supply the oil to Israel. The oil comes out of Azerbaijan, flows through Turkey. There are, the parties in Turkey that are making money off of this. So, I don't mean to be offensive, but I mean, it's just the truth. Turkey is in a position to really be a leader in this, a genuine leader in bringing about the peace process by stopping Israel. And instead, they talk a good game, but then look at the actions. The oil continues to flow. As long as that oil flows, Israel can continue this war, can continue killing the Palestinian people.
What if, okay, the Arabs haven't done anything, in substance.
Right.
What if the proposed alliance comes about? Would it actually restrain Israel, and the Gulf Arab countries keep talking about their financial and economic leverage with the United States, because they say Israel is a burden on the United States, but we are the investors in the United States,
sure.
But we have very little say, but Israel basically has all the shots in Washington. How come?
Well, you make a very valid point about the potential of using both economic pressure, and look, I don't limit my criticism to the Arab Islamic countries alone. The fact is that Russia, China, India, to a lesser extent Brazil, they all have trade and diplomatic relations with Israel. Cut those relations. End the relations. Embargo Israel. Tell them that they're not going to be treated as part of the civilized world until they start acting civilized. But instead, all the countries, they go, oh, this is terrible. Oh, look, this is horrible. We condemn what Israel's doing. And then they meet with them. And then they continue to allow Israeli products to be sent to their countries, and they allow their products to be exported to Israel. Cut them off. Isolate them. Shut them down. And in fact, the Gulf Arabs, between the Saudis, the Qataris, the Emiratis, they ought to go right now to Donald Trump and said, You know, that money we promised to invest, we're not investing a dime in the United States. We're not giving you a penny, nothing, until you stop supporting Israel campaign of genocide. It has got to stop. Instead, everybody continues to go along.
Don't you think there was at least little substance in the summit in Qatar? Because for the first time they were talking about all these prospective sanctions on the United States, if you like, by the Gulf Arab countries. I think it was Qatar talking about canceling the purchase of Boeing aircraft, which was about $100 or $150 billion, and some others might follow. Don't you think this time round they may be serious about all that? Because after all, Israel has actually violated the sovereignty of an Arab country. Leaving Lebanon aside, Israel has not fought a state actor. Leaving Iran aside again, for understandable reasons, Israel has actually attacked an Arab country, a small Arab country, but it has enormous influence across the Arab world.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, what's truly shocking in this is, everyone assumed, and I'd say, if Jordan, the king of Jordan, King Abdullah, everyone assumed that, hey, Qatar, more so than any other country in the region, has this close relationship with the United States by virtue of the Al Udeid Air Force Base, that is the major logistics and military hub for the United States in the region. I was there in 2006 while I was going to Iraq. I was asked to be in Iraq for a particular mission back then. And, we flew into Qatar, went to Al Udeid, and then flew Al Udeid. So it's a critical hub. And you'd think, and I'm sure the Qataris thought, hey, we got the United States. They're our buddy. We're safe. They're not safe. The United States betrayed them. I don't know if the members of the Arab Islamic Summit actually understand the perfidy, the betrayal that took place in this. That the words of the United States are now meaningless. The promises are meaningless. And I did think that the optics, at least from the summit, were important. To see President Erdogan and President Pezeshkian, where Turkey and Iran have not exactly had the warmest of relationships, and then to even see Pezeshkian with al-Shara, the new, the recently the terrorist now dressed up as a respected president. The fact that Egypt and Iran are talking about reestablishing relationships. So, all of this, I think these were important. And in fact, that even King Abdullah was there, because, Abdullah is such a toady and lackey of the United States that, I think even the attack on Qatar awakened within him some fear and recognition that if the United States can do that to Qatar, they sure as hell can do it to Jordan. So the words were a significant step. I think it does represent the declining influence of the United States in the region. But where is the action? Words are nice. Action tells what you're really about.
Okay, well, two things now to follow up your comments. Basically, one is in terms of the action, perhaps, which may come from the Egyptian president made it quite clear that if Israel were to attack any Hamas member on Egyptian soil, then that would be the end of Egypt-Israeli relations. He even talked about rescinding all the peace treaties between the two countries, and reportedly he has ordered Chinese-made air defense systems into the Sinai Peninsula. Because the Israeli government, Netanyahu in particular, was boasting after their attack on Qatar that this would be a message that should be taken as such by those countries who host Hamas leaders.
Yeah.
Or, as they say, Hamas terrorists.
Sure.
So Egypt took the message, got the message, and then responded.
Right. Well, let's be clear.
The other is Turkey. I'll come to that.
Sure. Yeah, well, first, let's be clear that the definition of terrorism is the use of violence against civilians for political purposes. Under that definition, the number one terrorist in the region is Israel. Israel is a terrorist nation, which begs the question, why is Egypt waiting until they kill somebody, kill a Hamas person in Egypt? Israel has already done enough in terms of killing Palestinians to justify Egypt saying, we're not going to, this is not the basis of a relationship. These diplomatic relationships at a minimum need to be based upon mutual respect. Israel respects no one. Israel looks down their nose at Egypt, at Turkey, at Syria, at Lebanon. They don't care whether it's Turkish or Arabic. You're subhuman to them. This is the reality. You're Amalek. And God says in their twisted scripture that they can kill you. When you're dealing with somebody like that, there is no foundation of reason. There's no foundation of dialogue in that. This is one that has to be confronted with force. And I think that there is a lot that can be done both economically and diplomatically without having to resort to violence that can compel Israel to stop what it's doing.
What is your sense regarding the rising tension between Israel and Turkey? So the Israelis in particular using warlike language. So they're basically backing up the Greeks in Cyprus, and there's been increasing tension in Syria. So basically they don't want Turkey in Syria. I would say, or I would add, that it was a huge mistake on the part of the Turkish government to basically to overthrow the regime in Syria, because it was like a huge victory to Israel on a golden plate.
Correct. Yeah, well, look, this, I'm sure there's got to be a story, a children's story about don't climb into bed and sleep with a scorpion because you'll be stung. And in my view, that's exactly what Turkey did. Turkey collaborated with Israel in the removal of Bashar al-Assad. Now I understand why President Erdogan would do that in terms of pursuing Turkey's national interests. But in collaborating with Israel, you're simply collaborating with a serial murderer. And as I said previously, Israel they're incapable of working with Turkey and respecting Turkey's interests. It's a one-way relationship. They demand that you supply them, that you give to them, that you accede to their demands, that you surrender to their orders. They don't recognize Turkey's national interest at all. And so that's where, I think this, I'm not sure what the full dimensions of that plan was, but it's clear that the U.S. intelligence, British intelligence, the government of Turkey, and Israel all collaborated, conspired, and cooperated in some form or fashion to get rid of Bashar al-Assad.
Well, they did, and I don't think it was in line with Turkey's national interest.
Yes.
The Turkish government presumably got dragged into that policy through its Islamist leanings.
Yeah.
Because Bashar Assad's government was a completely secular one, or you can go to you can even say, or as they did when they started it, it is largely dominated by Alawites and blah blah. So, and I don't think what they have done was in Turkey's interest either.
Correct.
But what I'm saying is here, do you sense that Israel would actually go to that length to pick up a fight with Turkey over Syria, which would then spread to Cyprus and what have you, a NATO country basically? Because on the other hand, Israel has not fought a proper state since 1973 war.
Yeah. No, I think they would. Israel has no constraints. They've shown that, and they're not really thinking this through strategically either. They're really reacting very emotionally. Going to war with Turkey would be a disaster for Israel, but at the same time, Israel's not going to hesitate to attack and destroy Turkish targets in Syria if Israel believes that those represent a potential threat to Israel. Now, the reality is Turkey's got the largest military in West Asia, or Turkey and Iran combined, two of the largest, most capable military forces. Egypt's got some numbers, but the Egyptian army's performance has been pretty spotty in the past. But the fact of the matter is that between Turkey, Iran, and Egypt, there is now sufficient military power to compel Israel to stop. And to that end, Turkey's interests in Syria are, they take a back seat to those of Israel. And the only thing that's going to stop Israel eventually is if they are forced to realize that they cannot achieve their goals militarily. And look, we're now coming upon a full 24 months since the start of military operations in Gaza. And Israel, with every military advantage a modern military could have, has been unable to defeat Hamas. The performance of the Hamas fighters is heroic, historic. It's really, it is the ultimate David versus Goliath story.
Okay. So basically, I gather from what you said that Israel would not hesitate to attack Egyptian targets either.
Correct.
But again, don't you think that it would actually lead to a disastrous consequences in the Arab-United States relations and also Arab-Israeli relations?
Well, it should. I'll preface it that way. It should. But let's look what happened on, so on Monday, the Arab Islamic Summit assembles in Doha. And, I'm sure by virtue of your experience that document that they produced, they'd been working on that for, 2 or 3 weeks. And that really had a lot of diplomatic elbow grease in it. Took a lot of work to get 54 countries to agree to a text like that. And I thought it was a very strong text, in terms of by virtue of words. But so there on Monday, they assemble. And what does Marco Rubio do? Marco Rubio goes to Tel Aviv, meets with Bibi Netanyahu. And then after that meeting, Israel launches a renewed offensive in Gaza, killing more Palestinians. Now, that was just that if you will, that was the ultimate insult to the Arab Islamic Summit. That, we don't care what you say. We don't care what document you produce. We're going to do whatever the hell we want because the United States basically gave us the green light. And, I haven't seen a united outcry from the 54 members of that summit in the aftermath of this blatant illegal attack by Israel. So, that's why I come at this, that the Arab Islamic countries, they do have the capability to put on tremendous pressure on Israel, to isolate it, to move forward with removing Israel from the United Nations. They should have no place there. But so far it's talk, no action.
What about the Israeli influence over the U.S. decision-making then?
Oh, yeah.
Because, practically speaking, the United States is the only country that can stop Israel from doing what it has been doing. But it hasn't been acting so, despite the fact that the public pressure is growing in the United States. And again, public pressure in European countries is growing, but there is, the public pressure doesn't seem to influence the decision-making in the European countries either.
Correct.
There's very little effect in certain countries, Spain, Ireland, some others, and as the British public basically comes up and roars up, British government's attitude changes little. Again, the French government attitude changes little. The German government keeps saying the catchphrase, Israel has the right to defend itself.
Yeah.
It's in the face of an ongoing genocide. But in the case of the United States, it is really inexplicable. You've been writing and talking about all that. What would you say all about that?
That the United States has the best government money can buy, and that Israel's spent a lot of money to buy it. Through groups like the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee, as well as a host of very wealthy Zionist billionaires. And I emphasize Zionist as opposed to Jewish because within that there are also Christian Zionists who are big enablers of Israel in this regard. Israel wields enormous influence over the political process in this country, and it is true that there is a growing tide, at least among people under 40, against that. They hate it, they despise it. That's been one of the themes with respect to the murder of Charlie Kirk, that there was clear evidence that he was moving away from his pro-Zionist position. And he admitted in recent days that he had been under enormous pressure from these Zionist billionaires to, separate himself from people like Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, Dave Smith. People, I don't think your listeners are familiar with all those names, but Dave Smith, for example, is a Jewish comedian who's been very outspoken against Israel's genocide. Tucker Carlson is a media figure, and I think pretty well known. But just again, the pressure Charlie Kirk was facing to distance himself from those positions and embrace a full-on Zionist position, and he wasn't willing to do that. So, that's where I say we get the spillover from what's going on with respect to Israel and this campaign of genocide and how it's filtering its way into domestic politics in the United States.
Would you also share with us and with our viewers your suspicion that actually surrounds the killing of Charlie Kirk? Because I've read a long piece by you recently, and you have basically come out, as usual, with very compelling arguments.
Yeah, it is now clear that the person who fired the shot, a young man named Robinson, was, he fired the shot. He used his grandfather's rifle. There was video of him going into the building. There is video of him running away afterwards. You can see there was a rifle being carried in a towel. It's difficult to see that at a distance, but you could see he was moving things from hand to hand. In his own emails, he admitted that he had dropped the rifle in a forest, hit it. He was texting with his, his male lover, or he had a romantic interest that is transgender, a guy claiming to become a woman. So there's no doubt that he fired the shot. Now, why? That's where we get into some of these other issues. That was he being manipulated by Mossad? Possibility. Could he have been manipulated by the Ukrainian intelligence service? And I say that because it turns out that, and again, I'm taking these reports at face value, that his uncle is active in fighting in Ukraine with the Azov battalion, which is a neo-Nazi organization. So there are two other possible manipulators behind the scene. The other thing that leads me to believe that there's something more to this than just him hating Charlie Kirk, because Charlie Kirk had the audacity to say, God has created male and female, and there's no other in between, which I believe that. I believe in science. I believe in biology. But what we've seen is it's an orchestrated campaign to create alternative narratives. One narrative, for example, focuses on Charlie Kirk's bodyguards and suggests that they shot him. And you've got a lot of people believing that because they see movements and signals that these guys are giving without understanding that maybe that was part of their security plan. There's another one that shows someone claim the guy's holding a gun in his hand, shooting from the side. And a lot of people are saying, oh boy, that's real. They ignore the actual video evidence we have of the shot hitting Charlie. And the video clip itself, it takes a total of really 3 seconds. 1,001, 1,002, 1,000, that's it. If you slow it down and go frame by frame, though, what you see is that a bullet, when it's traveling at supersonic speed, creates a shock wave. And that shock wave of air actually goes before it, or the bullet is driving the air before it, and it creates like a contrail behind. You see, before the actual bullet penetrates Charlie, you see his shirt get lifted up, and then as the video goes on, it then comes back down. So the shirt was lifted up by a shock wave of air. He gets hit in the throat, and I tell everybody, just hit yourself there. See if you can hit yourself there, make your head go backwards. That's not how it works. His head comes down, and then where the bullet penetrated, it hit the carotid artery. And I'm sure the medical examiner will show that the path of the bullet then continued to the spinal column, the cervical spine. And whether it hit it directly or passed close by with its shock wave, it caused neurological damage, which then Charlie comes up and starts stiffening. His arms come up, and then he falls to the side as just a complete flood of blood comes out of him. So this was a deliberate murder. And what's so awful about it is that Charlie Kirk, in his interactions with people, it was always about dialogue. He was not a mean-spirited, evil person. He had strong beliefs. He was a young man, 31 years of age. And I'm sure, Professor, if they asked you and I to go back to when we were 31, did we say or do things that we now might have regretted or would change and do differently? Of course. I mean, that's part of life and of getting older. But he had actually showed that he was the kind of person willing to engage ideas and even change his positions. So this is really created a great divide in the United States. Some would cite it as the start of a civil war.
Well, that was the point I was going to actually come over to. Now, this assassination and the frustration of the American youth under 40, as you pointed out, and also certain sections of the American people, both from the Democrats and the Republicans, getting frustrated over and over again by the Israeli actions.
Yes.
What would, in your sense, lead to gradually? Because given that the United States' power and strength, financially, economically, militarily, strategically, has been counterbalanced by very powerful countries like China, Russia, and also by regional countries here and there, and there is multipolarity which has become almost unstoppable, and the United States public should clamor for restriction on the aid the United States supplies to Israel all the time.
Well, you and I are living through a historic period in which the very international foundation on which international order is erected, it's changing. The order that was created in the aftermath of World War II, the Bretton Woods agreements, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, even the United Nations. We're at a period of time now where many of those institutions are no longer relevant, and something new is emerging. The development of BRICS with Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and then other countries that have now joined, including Indonesia, Vietnam, Iran. This is creating a new world economic order and a new political order. The growing influence, I think, of organizations like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, along with BRICS, are creating alternatives. Because let's be frank, why in the hell should England and France have a veto in the UN Security Council? Those countries are irrelevant. They're nothing. They're not economic powers. They don't control great armies. They don't control important resources. All they have is a horrific legacy of colonial exploitation of other countries. So right off the bat, they ought to be tossed from the UN Security Council as permanent members. They have no longer have, it doesn't make any sense. Whereas a country like India absolutely should be considered. Brazil also has, I think, a credible case to make as being a permanent member. But the United States is not adjusting well to this change. And I use the example of the former company Kodak. I'm sure you remember Kodak. They were the producer of film for cameras, where we used to have cameras where we'd have to open the back and put in a roll of film. And Kodak, I mean, we are so essential. Everybody needs us. Nobody can live without us. And then boom, with the arrival of the smartphones and cameras on those smartphones, all of a sudden people could take pictures without having to buy 35 millimeter film. And what happened to Kodak? It disappeared. It went away. And in a way, I believe there's that potential right now confronting the West, that it is wedded to old technology, old ideas, and an unjust system of having exploited countries in the global South. And now that's changing. And they're refusing to acknowledge or wake up to the change. So, I think we're witnessing sort of the birth pains of something new, and many in the West fail to grasp it.
And are we also witnessing a major change in the U.S. internal politics and the public attitude, electoral attitude towards Israel? For instance, I don't think in the 1960s or even 70s, U.S. public or the Western public ever, they always defended whatever aid the United States could actually supply to Israel all the time, because Israel was the victim and all that. But now the United States economically is not that powerful, and it is not going to be that powerful in the decades ahead. And the public attitude and the electoral profile is changing in the United States. What is your sense about all that?
Yeah, no, you're right that we're experiencing some real fundamental changes. Number one, the divide in the United States is significant. Whether that has been created and encouraged and spread through outside influence or not, I don't know. What we do know is that this globalist view, this view that there's no such thing as biological sex, that male and female is an outmoded concept, that now you can be whatever you want to be. The spread of the normalization of homosexuality is something that should be embraced as opposed to being tolerated. All of the U.S. position of having used its economic power to coerce others is now coming to an end, because with the United States debt, it's out of control. Debt to GDP ratio is in excess of 125%. The deficit is growing at a rate of about $1 trillion every 2 months. So, last year we may have been talking about a $33 trillion deficit. Now it's in excess of $37 trillion. It may very well be upwards of $40 trillion by next year. And so at some point there will be an economic collapse in the United States, and it'll have global repercussions. So this right now there is no political party or position or individual in the United States that is seen as somebody who can bridge these gaps. Instead, Trump is he's either loved or hated. There's really no middle ground with it. And from that standpoint, he's a polarizing figure. Unfortunately, in my own view, I think he's made a lot of very, very bad decisions and creating more problems for himself in the future.
Well, thank you very much. It's been very fruitful, with a lot of thoughts with a lot of food for thoughts, and hope to see you again on our program. And the Turkish viewers will get to know you more and more.
Well, Professor, I am again honored by the invitation, and I appreciate the hospitality, and I do look forward to chatting with you again. Have a very good day.
Well, same to you. To me, a good evening, and to you, a good day.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye for now.